Adanna had never believed in love at first sight until the day she met Emeka at a friend's wedding in Enugu. The hall was filled with laughter, music, and the scent of fried plantains and jollof rice. But for Adanna, the world had narrowed down to one man, tall, dark, with a smile that could make the coldest heart melt. Emeka had noticed her too, and from that moment their lives became intertwined in a way neither of them could have predicted. Their courtship was a dream painted in soft shades of joy. Emeka was attentive, charming, and endlessly patient. He wrote her letters, whispered promises under the mango trees near her family home, and laughed in a way that made her heart lift. Adanna, shy and gentle, had given him her heart. Without hesitation, they were young in love and certain that nothing could tear them apart. When they married, the whole neighborhood celebrated. Friends and family called it a union written by fate. For the first few years, life was blissful. Adanna felt treasured. Emeka's words of love were constant, his gestures of affection daily. Every morning, he kissed her forehead before leaving for work. Every evening, he returned with flowers, chocolates, and laughter. Their home was small, but brimming with warmth, and for a while Adanna thought she had stepped into a storybook life. But happiness has a way of testing the strongest hearts. After 2 years of marriage, Adanna became pregnant for the first time. Joy erupted in the household like fireworks. Emeka danced around the room, holding her close, promising that soon their home would echo with laughter and cries of a child. But the celebration was short-lived. At 3 months, she miscarried. The pain was excruciating, physical and emotional, leaving her hollow. Emeka's initial grief soon turned into disappointment. Though he tried to mask it with half-hearted sympathy, the miscarriages didn't stop there. Each time Adanna carried hope, like a fragile glass, only to have it shattered 3 more times. The heartache returned with every loss. Emeka's patience wore thinner. The laughter in their home grew scarce, replaced by sharp words and quiet mockery. "Maybe some women are just meant to remain empty," he said one evening, staring at her with eyes that no longer held warmth. Adanna's heart cracked each time he spoke. She loved him still fiercely, but his cruelty cut deeper than any miscarriage ever could. 8 long years passed, 8 years of whispered prayers at midnight, tears hidden under the pillow, and relentless mockery that gnawed at her self-worth. She became a shadow of the woman she once was, smiling when she had nothing to smile about, surviving when every fiber of her body wanted to give up. Then one ordinary morning, 8 years after their marriage, she felt it, the unmistakable flutter of life. Inside her, her heart skipped beats, and a cautious hope rose in her chest. She held her belly, afraid to believe, afraid to be crushed again. She went to the doctor, whose eyes widened with disbelief. "You are pregnant, and it is healthy," he said, voice trembling. Adanna wanted to cry, to laugh, to scream all at once. When she told Emeka, he smiled, a tight, cautious smile. But deep down, he didn't believe it would last. "It is too early to celebrate," he muttered. "You might lose it." Like before, his words, though careful, carried a venomous undertone of mockery, and she felt the familiar ache in her chest. Months passed, and Adanna's pregnancy defied every expectation. She carried the child, or rather the children, with quiet determination, surviving his stares and occasional jabs. The tension in the household grew unbearable. Emeka became increasingly distant, his resentment simmering beneath forced smiles. Then came the day when the impossible happened. Adanna went into labor during a stormy night. Thunder rumbled across the skies of Lagos, as if warning the city that something extraordinary was unfolding. In the small house on the corner of Eco Street, her water broke, and she clutched the bedsheets, heart hammering, her body shaking with a mix of fear and exhilaration. This time, however, there was no terror of loss. The children inside her fought to live with a determination that mirrored her own. The first baby emerged, a boy screaming into the world, red and raw, gripping life as though he had been born for survival. Then the second, a girl, delicate and fierce. And then the third, fourth, and fifth, 5 children, all born within the span of hours, each one crying, each one alive. Adanna's body was spent, trembling violently, but her spirit soared. She held each child close, marveling at the miracle she had brought into the world. Yet even amidst the overwhelming joy, a shadow of dread crept into her heart. She knew Emeka. She knew how he thought. He had never been a man of responsibility when it came to hardship. 5 children meant 5 lives, to feed 5 mouths, to nourish 5 futures, to secure, and deep down he feared what he would be forced to give financially, emotionally, socially. Morning arrived, gray and dripping with rain. The house smelled of damp and the faint tang of blood. Adanna had washed herself, wrapped the children in the cleanest cloths she could find, and waited. Emeka returned late, As always, his eyes fell on the children, and for the first time, he was speechless. A long silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. Adanna's chest tightened. She held the 5 children, their tiny fingers clutching her hands, and each other finally. He spoke, "What is this?" His voice was low, disbelief and horror mixing in equal measure. "These are your children," she said, voice trembling, but defiant. "We prayed for them. God has blessed us." Emeka laughed, a cold, harsh sound that seemed to reverberate through the walls. Five at once. "You have gone mad." His hands trembled not with fear, but with rage. "I cannot, I want to do this," he muttered, voice breaking slightly. Without another word, he fled out the door into the rain-soaked streets, leaving Adanna and the 5 children alone. The slam of the door echoed like the last drumbeat of her old life, a life where she thought she had love and partnership. She sank to the floor, gripping the children to her chest. Her body was raw, exhausted, but her mind raced. The house felt suddenly enormous and empty, the echoes of his departure loud against the walls. Yet within the despair, a strange clarity emerged. She would survive, she would care for her children, she would endure. Neighbors would later whisper, astonished, "Did you see what he did?" Ran away from 5 at once. But Adanna did not care. She had faced years of mockery, heartbreak, and loneliness. She had survived every miscarriage, every taunt, every bitter word. She had raised herself alongside these children before they even took their first breath. She would survive this too. As the rain poured and the city slept, Adanna held the quintuplets close, their tiny breaths warming her chest. The storm outside was nothing compared to the one she had weathered inside her soul. And for the first time in years, she allowed herself a flicker of hope. Perhaps this time the story would be different. Perhaps this time love would not abandon her. But she knew deep down that she would not wait for it. She would fight, she would protect, she would endure. And whatever Emeka's plans were, whatever he thought he could do, he would soon learn that abandonment had forged in her a strength stronger than he could ever imagine. The night stretched on, heavy with suspense, rain, and the cries of 5 tiny miracles outside the world carried on, unaware of the life-altering events in that small Lagos home. But inside, a new chapter had begun, not of love, not of betrayal, but of survival, resilience, and unyielding maternal courage. The morning after Emeka vanished, Adanna sat on the cracked veranda, her eyes fixed on the rain-soaked streets of Lagos. The children were still asleep in the small, dimly lit room behind her, bundled tightly in cloths she had stitched herself. She counted their tiny breaths, one by one, and marveled at how 5 lives could rest so peacefully against her exhaustion. A mix of relief and dread churned inside her. She had survived abandonment before, but nothing could prepare a woman for the responsibility of 5 newborns, all depending entirely on her. The city outside was waking up slowly. Shopkeepers swept the gutters, motorbikes roared down the street, and the occasional hawker cried his wares into the morning air. Life continued as if nothing had changed, but Adanna's world had shifted on its axis. One man's cowardice had left her to carry the weight of 5 lives alone. The first weeks were a blur of feeding, washing, cleaning, and rocking. The babies cried in unison sometimes, a high-pitched symphony of helplessness that tore through her nerves. There were moments when she felt herself unraveling, when her arms ached and her mind screamed for respite. But she would not allow despair to take root. Not when 5 small hands reached for her, not when 5 tiny faces searched for comfort. Her neighbors, once kind, now whispered behind doors and over fences. "Can a woman survive this alone?" some would ask, shaking their heads. 5 at once. That is a curse. Adanna ignored them, knowing that their curiosity was as much fear as judgment. She had learned long ago that outsiders had little say in the destiny of the determined. Money was a constant worry. Emeka's absence had left the household without a steady income. Adanna sold fabrics at the local market, waking before dawn to prepare them and returning after dark, exhausted and covered in dust. At times she begged for credit from shopkeepers, promising to pay later, and sometimes they refused, shaking their heads at her audacity or misfortune. Yet she endured. Each naira she earned, each meal she provided, was a victory against the abyss Emeka had left behind. The babies grew quickly, and with every passing day, new challenges emerged. Chibuzo, the eldest, was strong and determined even as a toddler, always stretching his small body to reach for food or to crawl toward safety. Adiz, the first girl, had a sharp mind and a stubborn will that made her difficult to calm. Chico was quiet and observant, always watching the others, learning silently. Ifani was loud, demanding attention in every way possible, while Neka, the smallest, clung to Adanna as if she were the only constant in the world. Adanna had no choice but to organize her life with military precision. She established routines, feeding schedules, and nap times, and she learned to multitask in ways that defied human limits. She would hold one child while washing another, rock the third with her foot, and soothe the remaining two with a lullaby sung low in her throat. Sleep became a memory, a fleeting luxury she could afford only when the city's chaos lulled. Yet, even in the exhaustion, there were moments of beauty. She would watch Chibuzo reach out for his siblings and smile when they returned the gesture. She marveled at Adi's laughter, sharp and musical, echoing off the walls of the tiny house. Even Neka's tiny fingers curling around her own were a reminder of the life that persisted despite everything. These were her reasons to rise every morning, her motivation to endure what seemed impossible. Despite her focus, a creeping fear lingered in the back of her mind. She knew Emeka had left because of fear, not love. And fear had a way of morphing into arrogance, and arrogance could bring men back into places where they did not belong. She had heard whispers in the market, murmurs from former friends of the family, that Emeka was asking questions, that he was curious about the children, that he was wondering if Adanna had survived alone. Each time she heard such rumors, her heart clenched, and a cold dread spread through her. The first night, she sensed danger was subtle. A shadow passed by the cracked window while she rocked Neka to sleep. She froze, listening. The children slept, unaware of the world beyond the walls of the house. She told herself it was only imagination, a trick of exhaustion. But sleep came reluctantly, and her dreams were haunted by a man she once loved, now turned phantom of her past. Food was another constant challenge. She scavenged markets for discounted goods, bartered with neighbors for milk or eggs, and sometimes went without so the children could eat. Her body weakened, her hands cracked from washing and cooking, her eyes rimmed with dark circles, yet she pressed on. Every day she reminded herself that giving up was not an option. She was their mother, their protector, their fortress. Even the city seemed to sense her struggle. The streets were filled with commotion and threat. Strangers eyed her with suspicion, and sometimes she had to fend off men who assumed a single mother of 5 was vulnerable. She carried herself with the quiet authority of someone who had faced the worst storms and survived. Lagos could be cruel, but so could she when necessary. By the time the children were 6 months old, Adanna had begun teaching them small lessons, simple games, and routines that gave structure to their days. She read from borrowed books, sang songs from her childhood, and whispered prayers for protection into the night. The community began to notice her determination, and some began to murmur admiration beneath their breath. But even admiration did not soften the worry that Emeka's shadow lingered. The children's health became another source of anxiety. One evening, Chibuzo developed a high fever, and Adanna, panic clawing at her throat, carried him to the nearest clinic. The nurse looked at her, 5 children in tow, and shook her head at the chaos. But the boy recovered, and Adanna returned home with renewed determination. She could not fail them. Not now, not ever. As months turned into years, small victories accumulated. The children learned to crawl, then walk, then run. They grew curious and loud, filling the small house with energy and noise that sometimes made her feel alive and sometimes left her exhausted beyond words. And yet, through it all, the fear of Emeka's return never left her. She did not know when he would come or what he would want, but she felt it like a storm on the horizon, inevitable and dangerous. She began teaching them resilience early. Chibuzo learned to protect his siblings, Adiz to solve problems, Chika to observe and plan, Ifani to assert himself, and Neka to trust her instincts. Adanna knew the city could be merciless, and her children needed to be ready. Her lessons were harsh at times, but filled with love disguised as discipline. Evenings were the hardest. The city quieted, the sun dipped behind buildings, and the loneliness settled. She would rock Neka, hum lullabies, and imagine a world where Emeka had never left. And then, with a sudden shiver, she would remind herself that reality was different. Emeka had abandoned them, but she was still here, alive and unbroken. She would not allow his return to threaten the life she had built. One day, while selling fabrics at the market, she noticed a man asking questions about her neighborhood, about her children. His smile was familiar, but she turned her back, refusing to meet his eyes. Lagos was vast and full of secrets, but Emeka had a way of making himself known when he wished. That brief encounter set her heart racing and reminded her that the past was never truly gone. Adanna returned home that evening with a determination that surprised even herself. She laid the children to sleep, checked the doors, and whispered prayers into the night. Tomorrow she would rise before dawn as always, prepare for the market, and face the world with the quiet strength that had sustained her so far. But tonight she allowed herself a moment of reflection. She thought of how far she had come, how much she had endured, and how little time remained before the children grew strong enough to notice the dangers of the world themselves. Outside, the wind rustled through the narrow streets, carrying the distant sounds of the city into the small home. Adanna held Neka close, listening to the others breathing softly in the dark. A shiver of anticipation ran through her. She did not yet know what Emeka's return would mean, but she knew one thing for certain. She would be ready. She had survived abandonment, mockery, financial hardship, and sleepless nights. She had raised 5 lives on her own, and she had done it all without surrendering. Whatever storm was coming, she would face it head on. And when it arrived, she would stand unbroken, a mother who had conquered every obstacle and built a fortress no man could dismantle. By the time the children were ready for school, Adanna had settled into a rhythm that balanced survival and hope. Chibuzo had become tall and vigilant, always watching over his younger siblings. Adiz clever and quick-witted, Chika observant and thoughtful, Afani stubborn and bold, and Neka small but fiercely determined. Each child had their own personality, their own way of challenging her, but together they were a force of chaos and love that filled the small house with life. The streets of Lagos were no kinder than before. The city roared with early morning traffic. Hawkers called out their wares, and the smell of fried akara and grilled fish drifted through the alleys. Adanna walked the children to the school across the neighborhood, 5 little hands clutching hers, their uniforms patched but clean, their shoes often scuffed from the relentless play of childhood. School brought a new set of battles. The other children stared, whispered, and sometimes laughed when they saw 5 siblings from one family. Some teachers questioned how one mother could manage so many, and gossip traveled faster than the morning buses. Chibuzo bore the brunt of it, often stepping in to shield his sisters and brothers from ridicule. Adiz answered back with words sharper than her age warranted. Chika observed quietly, learning patterns in human behavior. Ifani caused small chaos that distracted others, while Neka clung to Adanna or Adiz, silent but vigilant. Adanna's mornings were a test of endurance. She cooked breakfast, washed uniforms, mended torn socks, and organized their bags. She woke before dawn, prepared them for school, and then went to the market to sell fabrics or odd goods, returning only when the sun was ready to set. Exhaustion was a constant companion, but so was her determination. The city's eyes were upon her, judging, questioning, and sometimes pitying, but she ignored them. Her focus was on her children. Despite the hardship, she never let the children feel defeated. Lessons in resilience began at home. Chibuzo learned to help cook. Adiz learned to manage small money exchanges at the market. Chika practiced reading aloud from borrowed books. Ifani learned to carry messages for neighbors, and Neka, always close to her mother, learned observation and patience. These were practical skills, survival skills in a world that had already shown them cruelty and indifference. Yet Adanna's mind often wandered to the past. She remembered Emeka's face that day he fled, his laughter of disbelief echoing in her mind. Though 8 years had passed since she had first prayed for children, she had not forgotten his betrayal. Now, with the children growing and gaining strength, she sensed a shift in the air. Whispers of him occasionally reached her ears, friends, neighbors, or even strangers speaking of a man asking questions about a family of 5 remarkable children. Her heart tightened each time. One afternoon, while selling fabrics, she noticed a man linger at the corner of the market. He asked casual questions about the neighborhood, about families, about schools, and something in the way he looked at her children sent a chill down her spine. For a fleeting moment, she recognized the posture, the confident gaze. But when she tried to confront him, he was gone. Lagos had swallowed him into its chaos. Yet the feeling of being watched remained, a shadow lingering at the edge of her consciousness. At home, the challenges multiplied. The children grew curious, testing boundaries, sometimes arguing with each other, sometimes refusing to follow rules. Adanna's patience was stretched thin, but she had learned to turn discipline into lessons rather than punishment. She spoke softly but firmly, explaining why certain behaviors were dangerous or inappropriate, always reminding them that the world outside their home could be cruel and unforgiving. Chibuzo was becoming protective in ways that both warmed and frightened her. He would watch the street vigilantly, refusing to let anyone approach without scrutiny. Adi's intelligence and cunning sometimes bordered on mischief, which meant she could manipulate small situations to her advantage, learning lessons faster than her mother anticipated. Chika absorbed everything silently, noting interactions, memorizing patterns of human behavior. Ifani was bold, often challenging authority figures or peers, which occasionally brought Adanna to tears and frustration. Neka, though small, possessed a quiet strength that she revealed only when necessary. Financial strain was relentless. Adanna had learned to stretch every naira, negotiate prices, and bargain fiercely in the market. Yet sometimes, even with her resourcefulness, meals were skipped, clothes patched too often, and shoes worn thin. She carried the invisible weight of 5 futures on her shoulders, constantly balancing survival and ambition. She wanted her children to rise above the whispers and judgments of neighbors who had once doubted her, but the world offered no easy hand. One evening, after returning from the market, she noticed a small envelope slipped under her door. Inside was a note: "You have done well, but do not think the past is gone." Her heart raced. The handwriting was familiar in the way it twisted letters, a pattern she had long memorized but did not want to see again. A surge of adrenaline rushed through her. She had trained herself for years to survive, to protect her children, yet the reminder that Emeka might still influence their lives filled her with unease. She placed the note in her pocket, pretending not to notice its threat as she fed the children and tucked them into bed. But sleep eluded her that night. She stared at the ceiling, listening to the soft breaths of Chibuzo, Adiz, Chika, Ifani, and Neka, and resolved that she would never allow fear to dictate their lives. She had survived Emeka's abandonment, Lagos's cruelty, and the judgment of neighbors. She could survive this too. Days turned into weeks, and the subtle presence of Emeka, though distant, began to ripple through her life. Occasionally, she would notice a shadow watching the street when she returned from the market, or a figure lingering near the school when she dropped off the children. She never confronted him directly. She had learned from experience that waiting, observing, and preparing were often more powerful than impulsive action. At school, the children began to excel despite the social challenges. Chibuzo quickly earned respect for his courage and leadership among his peers. Adi's sharp mind made her a favorite of teachers, though it also attracted jealousy. Chika continued to observe and learn quietly, while Afani's assertiveness created small conflicts that she navigated carefully. Neka's quiet determination made her beloved among the youngest children in the class. Adanna watched all of this with a mixture of pride and anxiety. Her children were growing stronger, but the outside world was relentless, and Emeka's looming presence added a tension she could never entirely dismiss. One afternoon, as she prepared dinner, she noticed a pair of unfamiliar shoes in the dirt path outside the house. Her heart skipped a beat. She did not panic openly, but inside, every muscle tightened. She told herself it might be a stranger or a neighbor, yet her instincts screamed otherwise. She began to realize that the past was not merely a memory. It was a shadow that could return at any moment, ready to disrupt the fragile peace she had built. The children sensed her tension. Chibuzo asked quietly, "Mama, is someone watching us?" Adanna knelt down and looked into his eyes, holding his small face in her hands. "Sometimes the world watches, my son," she said softly. "But no one can touch what we have built together. As long as we stay together, we are stronger than any shadow." Chibuzo nodded, understanding more than his years should allow. Night fell with a heavy stillness. Adanna moved through the house, checking doors and windows, ensuring that her children were safe. The city outside continued its endless pulse of noise, but inside, the house was quiet except for the soft breathing of 5 sleeping children. She allowed herself a brief moment of pride, knowing that despite every challenge, they were thriving. Yet even in this pride, a cold knot of fear remained. She knew Emeka was out there somewhere, watching, waiting, calculating. She had no doubt that he had not forgotten the family he abandoned, and she feared what he might attempt when the time came. For now, all she could do was prepare, teach her children vigilance, and hope that the lessons of survival, resilience, and love she had instilled would be enough to protect them. Adanna lay awake that night long after the children had fallen into deep sleep. She traced each one's face in her mind, memorizing their tiny features, their little quirks. She whispered prayers under her breath, promises to the universe that no harm would come to them. And though the night was dark and the city noisy with life, she felt a flicker of strength rise within her. She had survived abandonment before. She had survived ridicule and financial hardship. She had survived sleepless nights and unending responsibility. Whatever Emeka or the world might throw at her, she would meet it head-on, with courage and strategy. Her children would not suffer. Not now, not ever. And somewhere, in the shadowed corners of the city, Emeka was watching, waiting for the right moment. But Adanna was ready. She always had been. By the time the children reached their early teens, Adanna's house had transformed from a place of frantic survival into a bustling hive of energy, voices, and ambition. Chibuzo, now tall and commanding, had developed a quiet authority that made neighbors whisper in admiration. Adiz, intelligent and assertive, often clashed with teachers and peers alike, unafraid to speak her mind. Chika, the quiet observer, had grown into a young woman who could sense the emotions of everyone around her. Ifani, ever bold, had become a troublemaker who challenged rules with fierce determination. Neka, the smallest, had grown strong in her own subtle way, a silent strategist who watched before acting. Adanna, meanwhile, bore the marks of years of struggle. Her hands were calloused from labor and market work, her back ached from carrying children and goods, and dark circles rimmed her eyes from sleepless nights. Yet she remained resolute, determined to keep the family together and safe. She had survived abandonment, financial strain, and societal judgment, and she refused to let anything break the fragile fortress she had built around her children. The neighborhood had grown more curious as well. Children who had once mocked the quintuplets now looked to them with a mixture of awe and fear. Teachers whispered about the unusual family, and neighbors sometimes offered help, though often grudgingly. Despite occasional kindness, Adanna knew the city had no mercy for mistakes or weaknesses, and she trained her children to rely on their intelligence, wit, and resilience. School brought new challenges as adolescence approached. Chibuzo's protective instincts sometimes clashed with teachers who saw him as overly assertive. Adiz's intelligence, while admired, made her a target for jealousy. Chika observed silently, gathering knowledge and understanding far beyond her years. Ifani's defiance brought him into frequent trouble, and Neka's quiet independence made her a mystery to all who tried to understand her. Adanna had little time to reflect on these changes during the day. She worked tirelessly at the market, often walking long distances with heavy bundles of fabrics, bargaining fiercely for every naira. The income barely met their needs, yet she persisted. Each day was a calculated struggle, balancing survival with the education and well-being of her children. Loneliness had become a constant companion. She had no husband, no partner to share burdens with, and the social world often felt cold and judgmental. Yet she found solace in small victories: a good grade for Chibuzo, a clever solution from Adiz, a kind word from a teacher recognizing Chika's quiet intelligence, Ifani's resilience in the face of adversity, and Neka's unyielding curiosity. Each achievement was a reminder that her sacrifices had meaning. Despite these victories, a shadow lingered over their lives. Rumors persisted that Emeka had not forgotten them, that he was asking questions, observing from afar, calculating his next move. Adanna dismissed many of these stories as idle gossip, but a mother's instincts are seldom wrong. She sensed the presence of a man who had once abandoned them, who had left scars too deep to heal completely. One evening, as she returned from the market, she noticed a figure standing across the street. He watched silently, eyes fixed on the house. Her heart clenched. The posture was unmistakable, the gaze sharp and deliberate. It was a shadow from the past, a reminder of betrayal that had never truly left. Adanna did not confront him immediately. Instead, she observed, calculating and patient. She had learned long ago that impulsive action could be dangerous. Inside the house, life continued as usual. The children had grown more independent, but they still required guidance. Chibuzo often took on responsibilities beyond his years, helping with household chores and mediating conflicts between his siblings. Adiz challenged herself academically, eager to escape the limitations of their modest circumstances. Chika, ever observant, began recording events in her notebooks, developing an early habit of reflection. Ifani's mischievous energy kept Adanna constantly alert, and Neka's quiet intuition often warned them of potential danger. Despite the increased independence of her children, Adanna's workload intensified. She had to manage the household, maintain her market business, and ensure the safety and education of all 5 children. Every day demanded a combination of endurance, strategy, and sheer willpower. There were moments when she felt the weight of the world pressing down on her, yet she refused to falter. She had survived before, and she would survive again. The shadow outside continued to haunt her. Occasionally, she would catch glimpses of movement in the alley or notice unfamiliar faces lingering near the school. Each sighting sent a shiver down her spine. She knew Emeka was clever and patient. If he intended to re-enter their lives, he would not rush. He would wait for the right moment, the moment when he could exploit weakness or hesitation. To protect her children, Adanna intensified their training in vigilance. She taught them to recognize danger, to trust their instincts, and to communicate silently when needed. Chibuzo learned to notice strangers and assess threats. Adiz honed her quick thinking and ability to manipulate situations to their advantage. Chika observed quietly, noting patterns and remembering faces. Ifani learned to act decisively under pressure, while Neka sharpened her intuition and learned to detect subtle signs of danger. School life was not without challenges. Chibuzo faced bullies who tested his patience and strength. Adiz navigated jealousy from classmates who envied her intelligence. Chika observed quietly, learning lessons from each encounter. Ifani often acted impulsively, causing conflict that required careful negotiation. Neka, though small, demonstrated an uncanny ability to read people and avoid trouble. Each challenge became a lesson, and Adanna guided them through every difficulty with a mix of firmness and care. Neighborhood gossip continued to swirl. Some admired Adanna's resilience, while others questioned her ability to maintain control over such a large family. Yet she ignored the whispers, knowing that survival was not determined by approval but by the strength of her actions. She had built a life from hardship, and no judgment could undo it. One afternoon, while Chibuzo and Adiz returned from school, they reported seeing a man standing near the gate, watching their house intently. Adanna's heart raced. The description matched Emeka. She did not panic openly, but quickly formulated a plan. She reinforced the gates, instructed the children on safety measures, and reminded them to remain calm and alert. The sense of suspense was heavy in the air, yet she maintained control, projecting confidence and strength. The presence of Emeka, even as a distant threat, changed the household dynamics. Chibuzo became more protective, Adiz more cautious, Chika more observant, Ifani more calculated in his actions, and Neka more alert to subtle cues. Adanna noticed these changes and took pride in the adaptability of her children. They were learning resilience not just from instruction, but from lived experience. Evenings were tense, but carefully managed. Adanna prepared meals while keeping an eye on the street, ensuring the children completed their homework and understood the importance of vigilance. She instilled routines that reinforced discipline, safety, and mutual support. The household thrived despite the looming threat, demonstrating the strength that adversity can cultivate. As the city quieted at night, Adanna often found herself staring out of the window, reflecting on the precarious balance she maintained. The shadow of Emeka was a constant reminder of unfinished business, yet it also reinforced her determination. She had survived abandonment, hardship, and relentless responsibility. Whatever came next, she would face it without hesitation. Her resolve was unwavering. She had built a fortress of love, discipline, and resilience. Her children had grown strong under her guidance. And though Emeka's presence lingered like a storm on the horizon, she knew that preparation, vigilance, and unity would shield her family from harm. In the quiet darkness, Adanna whispered a promise to herself and her children. Whatever the future held, they would face it together. The storm was coming, but they were ready. It was a late afternoon in Lagos. The kind of day where the sun burned lazily, casting long shadows across narrow streets. When Adanna first felt it, an unmistakable disturbance in her carefully ordered world. She had just returned from the market, her arms heavy with bundles of fabric, her mind focused on preparing dinner and checking the children's homework. But as she approached the gate, she noticed movement across the street. A man stood there, leaning casually against a lamppost. His posture was familiar, too familiar. Adanna's heart clenched in a way it hadn't in years. She froze mid-step, observing him closely. The man's eyes were scanning the street, but there was no doubt in her mind. He had returned. Emeka. She did not react outwardly. She knew the danger of appearing frightened or impulsive. Years of raising her children alone had taught her patience and strategy. Slowly, she carried the bundles inside, closing the door with deliberate calm. Her children were unaware of the storm that had just entered their neighborhood, yet Adanna felt the pulse of tension running through her veins. That evening, she gathered the children quietly in the living room. Chibuzo, now nearly 15, sensed her unease immediately. Adiz, always sharp, watched her mother carefully. Chika, observant as ever, read the tension in Adanna's posture. Ifani, restless and bold, fidgeted nervously. Neka clung to her mother, sensing a threat too subtle for words. "There is a man watching the house," Adanna said, voice low but firm. "Do not panic, do not speak about it outside, and most importantly, do not respond if he tries to contact you." Chibuzo nodded solemnly, his protective instincts kicking in. Adiz's eyes flashed with a mix of anger and curiosity. Chika remained silent, absorbing every word. Ifani's restlessness turned to determination, while Neka's grip on her mother tightened. Adanna spent the night planning. She reinforced locks, checked windows, and established protocols with the children. Each had a role. Chibuzo would monitor the street, Adiz would manage the house. When she was away, Chika would record observations, Ifani would alert her to any unusual behavior, and Neka would act as a lookout with her quick instincts. Their teamwork had been honed over years of survival, and now it was being tested in new ways. The next morning, Emeka made his first move. A messenger arrived at the gate with a note addressed to Adanna. She opened it cautiously, hands trembling slightly. The note read, "I have realized my mistake. I want to come back. Let us speak." Anger, disbelief, and a surge of fear battled inside her. She knew this was the beginning of a dangerous game. She folded the note carefully, hiding it from the children, and sat in the kitchen, plotting her next steps. She would not confront him immediately. She needed information, time, and strategy. Over the following days, Emeka's presence became more evident. Neighbors reported seeing him near the market, watching her from a distance, sometimes asking about the children subtly. It was clear he was testing boundaries, feeling out the environment before making a more direct approach. Adanna responded with silent vigilance, adjusting routines, teaching the children new ways to observe without revealing alarm. One afternoon, while the children were at school, a car stopped in front of the house. Emeka stepped out, looking around as if inspecting the property, before disappearing into a nearby alley. Adanna watched from the window, heart pounding, yet she did not allow panic to show. She knew that confrontation now would be premature. Instead, she used the moment to reinforce the children's training. Chibuzo and Adiz were instructed on how to communicate discreetly. Chika practiced noting unfamiliar faces. Ifani learned to move quickly without drawing attention, and Neka sharpened her awareness of subtle cues. As days turned into weeks, the tension escalated. Adanna maintained her composure, working in the market, managing the household, and continuing the children's education. Yet every movement outside the gate, every shadow, and every unfamiliar voice was a reminder that Emeka's return was imminent. The fear that had once haunted her had transformed into a calculated readiness, a state of constant vigilance. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the Lagos skyline, Emeka finally approached the gate. His eyes scanned the compound before settling on Adanna. She met his gaze steadily, holding her stance as the guardian of her household. The children, hidden behind walls and curtains, watched silently, feeling the tension in the air. Emeka's voice, when he spoke, was smooth but carried an edge of arrogance. "Adanna, I have come to make amends. I know I abandoned you, but I want to do the right thing now." Adanna did not respond immediately. She studied him, noting the way his gaze flicked toward the children. the subtle tension in his shoulders, and the calculated smile he offered. Years of survival had taught her to read men like books, and she could sense his motives clearly. This was not about love. This was about opportunity, about control, about testing the waters before making a move. "You are late," she said finally, her voice calm but carrying an unmistakable authority. "Too late to speak of love. Too late to undo the past. Leave now." Emika's expression faltered slightly, but he recovered quickly. "I only want to talk, Adanna. Give me a chance to explain, to be part of their lives again." Her eyes narrowed. "You abandoned them when they needed you most. You have no right to speak of being part of their lives. I have raised them alone, protected them, taught them to survive. Your words mean nothing until you prove your intentions with actions, not excuses." For the first time, Emika hesitated. He had expected a softer response, perhaps tears, perhaps a plea. Instead, he faced a woman forged by adversity, unyielding and vigilant. He could feel the weight of the fortress she had built around her family, and he realized that re-entry would not be simple. Adanna returned inside, closing the gate with deliberate care. She turned to the children, who had watched the encounter silently. Chibuzo's protective gaze softened, Adi's anger simmered. Chika's observant eyes gleamed with understanding. Ifani's boldness was restrained by caution, and Neka's silent grip on her mother's hand conveyed unspoken strength. That night, Adanna sat with the children, explaining what they had witnessed. "There are people who think they can return after leaving us in chaos," she said quietly. "But we are not helpless. We are strong, and we will act with wisdom and care. You must always remember what I have taught you. Observe, protect, and never be caught off guard." The children absorbed her words, internalizing the lessons that had become second nature. They understood that the shadow of Emika was more than a man. It was a test of their unity, resilience, and vigilance. They would need to work together to protect themselves and their mother from the threat he represented. As the city slept, Adanna lay awake, listening to the soft breathing of her children. She thought about the years she had endured alone, the battles she had fought in silence, and the strength she had cultivated. Emika's return was a storm approaching on the horizon, but she was ready. She had taught her children to survive, to fight, and to trust in their collective strength. Whatever his intentions, they would face it together. The shadow had returned, but the fortress of Adanna's family stood unbroken. She had weathered storms before, and she would do so again. Emika might try to manipulate, charm, or intimidate, but he would find that the woman he abandoned and the children he left behind were no longer vulnerable. They were a force forged in adversity, vigilant, prepared, and unyielding. The morning after Emika's first visit, Adanna awoke before dawn as usual, her mind already racing with plans. She had slept little, the memory of his gaze still vivid in her thoughts. The children were still asleep, their breathing slow and steady, unaware of the storm that had begun circling their lives once more. Adanna moved silently through the house, checking locks, windows, and gates. Every detail mattered now. She knew he would not give up easily. By mid-morning, the children were up and preparing for school. Chibuzo tied his shoes with precision, his jaw tight, reflecting the seriousness he had learned from his mother. Adiz adjusted her uniform, her sharp eyes scanning the street for anything unusual. Chika carried her notebook, ready to record details of their surroundings. Ifani hummed nervously, a restless energy barely contained. Neka clutched Adanna's hand, silently sensing the tension that filled the air. Adanna gathered them in the living room, her voice calm but commanding. "He will try again," she said, her eyes sweeping over each child. "We must be ready. Observe without drawing attention. Do not engage him unless I say so." Chibuzo nodded, his protective instincts sharpening. "Mama, if he comes near, should we confront him?" "No," Adanna replied firmly. "Confrontation is dangerous. Our strength is in patience, observation, and planning. He will reveal his intentions in time, and we will act when the moment is right." That afternoon, a delivery arrived at the gate, a small package containing fruits and a note from Emika. The message read, "I bring gifts as a symbol of my regret. Let us speak soon. I want to make amends." Adanna held the note in her hands, her mind racing. Actions, she knew, were what revealed character. She carefully placed the package out of the children's view and instructed Chibuzo to keep watch while she disposed of it discreetly. Her decision was deliberate. they would not be tempted or swayed. Emika's attempts were tests, and she would not fail them. He was seen near the school, lingering at the market, asking questions of neighbors and shopkeepers. Each sighting was brief, calculated, and unsettling. Adanna monitored every movement, teaching the children to remain calm while gathering information. Chibuzo noted patterns in his comings and goings. Adiz recorded conversations. Chika observed silently. Ifani practiced subtle signaling, and Neka learned to detect danger in small details. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the Lagos skyline, Emeka appeared at the gate again. This time, he spoke through the metal bars. Adanna, I know I cannot erase the past, but I can help now. I have resources I can provide for the children. Let me back into their lives. Adanna's lips pressed into a thin line. She studied him, noting the calculated charm in his eyes, the careful tone of his voice, the slight twitch of his fingers as he gestured. She saw clearly the man who had abandoned her, not the one pretending to seek redemption. You left us, she said evenly, her voice strong. You abandoned them when they needed you most. Gifts and words do not undo that. Actions do. Until you prove your intentions through sustained responsibility, you have no place here. Emeka's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing slightly. He had expected her to plead, to cry, to beg. Instead, he faced a woman stronger than he remembered, a fortress of resolve that he had underestimated. He backed away, disappearing down the street, leaving behind an uneasy silence. Adanna returned inside, gathering the children. She explained the encounter, emphasizing the importance of vigilance and patience. He will continue to test us, she said. We must remain united, disciplined, and observant. Any sign of weakness could be exploited. Never forget that. The children absorbed her words with a seriousness that reflected their years of training. Chibuzo's protective nature intensified, Adiz's intelligence sharpened, Chika's observation skills became more acute, Ifani's boldness was tempered with caution, and Neka's intuition heightened. Together, they formed a network of vigilance that mirrored Adanna's own careful strategy. The days grew tense. Emeka's attempts were subtle but persistent. He sent occasional notes, left small packages, and was seen observing the neighborhood from a distance. Adanna maintained her composure, balancing market work, household duties, and teaching her children resilience and strategic thinking. Each interaction, no matter how minor, was carefully analyzed. She did not allow herself to be drawn into confrontation prematurely. One afternoon, Chibuzo reported seeing a man following him from school. He had kept his distance but observed the boy carefully. Adanna recognized the figure immediately. Emeka had taken a step closer to testing the family's defenses. She instructed Chibuzo on evasion, communication, and observation, emphasizing that they would not engage directly. Every movement of the children was now part of a larger plan to protect themselves while gathering intelligence. At home, Adanna reinforced routines. Meals were prepared with efficiency, chores distributed to ensure maximum vigilance, and the children were reminded constantly of the importance of teamwork. She had transformed the household into a fortress, each member aware of their role and responsibility. The strength of their unity was their greatest weapon against Emeka's manipulations. Despite the pressure, there were moments of warmth and normalcy. The children laughed, teased each other, and played in the small yard. Adanna allowed these moments to exist, knowing that emotional resilience was as important as vigilance. Life continued within the walls of their home, a delicate balance of normalcy and preparedness. Emeka's presence, though threatening, inadvertently strengthened the family. Chibuzo became more decisive, Adiz more clever, Chika more attentive, Ifani more controlled, and Neka more aware. Adanna's guidance ensured that their strengths were honed, their instincts sharpened, and their unity reinforced. One evening, as the family gathered for dinner, a sudden noise outside drew their attention. Adanna's heart raced. She signaled for silence, and the children froze, every sense alert. A figure moved across the yard, then vanished. It was Emeka, testing the boundaries once again, reminding them of his presence. Adanna's mind raced with strategies, ensuring the family's safety while maintaining composure. She called the children together after dinner, her voice calm but firm. Tonight was a reminder, she said. The past is not gone, and shadows may attempt to re-enter our lives. But we are prepared. We are vigilant. We are strong. And we will protect ourselves together, no matter what comes. The children nodded, understanding the gravity of the lesson. They had grown under adversity, and now they were learning the importance of strategy, patience, and unity. Adanna's words were not just lessons. They were commands shaped by years of survival, forged in the fire of abandonment, and tempered by the necessity of protecting 5 lives from a man who had once betrayed them. As the night deepened, Adanna watched from the window, noting the city's movements, the sounds of distant traffic, and the quiet rustling of leaves in the wind. Somewhere, Emeka lingered, a shadow waiting for opportunity. But she was ready. She had anticipated his moves, trained her children, and fortified her home. Whatever plans he harbored, they would not succeed. The fortress she had built was unyielding. The family she had raised alone was vigilant, strong, and prepared. Emeka's return would not catch them off guard. The storm was approaching, but Adanna and her children were ready to face it head-on. In the quiet darkness, she whispered a promise to herself and to her children: "No one will break what we have built. No one will threaten our lives or our unity. Whatever comes, we will survive together." The first real crack in Adanna's carefully guarded routine came on a Thursday afternoon when the sky hung heavy with dark clouds and the air felt unnaturally still. She was returning from the market when she noticed the children standing closer together than usual near the gate. Their faces were tense and alert. This was not normal. Something had happened. Before Adanna could ask, Chibuzo stepped forward and said the man had come again. The words settled heavily in her chest. She asked when, keeping her voice calm. Adiz answered that it was earlier that day near the school. He had not followed them all the way home, but he had spoken to Ifani. Adanna slowly turned to her 4th child and asked what he said. Ifani swallowed before explaining that the man called his name and said he was their father. The word father hung in the air, heavy and uncomfortable, a title Emeka had abandoned many years ago. Ifani continued. The man said he wanted to help them. He said they deserved better than suffering. He said their mother was stubborn and holding them back. Adanna closed her eyes for a brief moment. This was not force. This was manipulation. Exactly what she had feared. She asked Ifani if he responded. He shook his head quickly and said Chibuzo stepped in front of him just like she had taught them, and they walked away together. Adanna straightened slowly. Her children had done well, but she knew something had changed. Emeka had crossed a dangerous line. He had gone directly to the children. That night, Adanna locked the compound earlier than usual and gathered the children before dinner. Her expression alone silenced them. She told them they had done well, but they needed to understand what was coming next. From now on, Emeka would try to divide them. He would speak gently. He would offer gifts. He would make promises. His goal was not love. His goal was control. Chika asked why now. Adanna explained that success attracts regret. Emeka had heard they were doing well. He saw opportunity. Adiz clenched her fists and asked if he wanted to benefit from them now after abandoning them. Adanna confirmed it quietly. The following morning, Emeka appeared openly. He parked his car where everyone could see it. He wore confidence like armor. Neighbors whispered. Children stared. He stood at the gate as if reclaiming territory. Adanna did not rush out. She watched carefully before stepping outside. Emeka commented on how grown the children were. Adanna responded that he should not speak to them. He claimed they were his children too. The words struck hard. Adanna told him he lost that right the day he ran away. He said fear made him leave, claiming anyone would panic at 5 children at once. Adanna reminded him that fear did not make him mock her for years, and fear did not make him abandon newborns. He claimed he had changed. Adanna told him he had calculated. Emeka then opened his car and brought out envelopes. He raised them slowly so the children could see. He said they were for school fees and food, and that he could make life easier. Adanna felt tension ripple through her children. Curiosity, anger, confusion. She raised her hand and told him to stop. He hesitated, irritation flashing across his face. He accused her of punishing the children out of pride. Adanna stepped forward and spoke with quiet strength. She reminded him of the miscarriages she buried while he mocked her. She reminded him that she carried 5 children when doctors said she was empty. She reminded him that she raised them alone when he disappeared. The street had gone silent. Neighbors were listening openly now. Emeka asked what she wanted. An apology. Adanna said she wanted him to leave and not return. He told her she could not erase him. She replied that she already had. That night, Emeka did not leave the area. Chibuzo spotted his car 2 streets away. Adiz noticed unfamiliar men watching the compound. Chika recorded times and movements. Ifani stayed indoors. Neka refused to sleep. Adanna understood then that Emeka was no longer testing boundaries. He was applying pressure. Days later, the pressure deepened. A letter arrived addressed directly to the children. Inside were promises of comfort, foreign education, and a better life. One line made Adanna's blood turn cold. Their mother is keeping them from their destiny. That night, the children argued for the first time. Ifani asked why they should reject help after years of struggle. Adiz fired back that help with strings was not help. Chibuzo remained silent, watching his mother. Adanna let them speak before she explained that Emeka was not offering support. He was offering ownership. Once they accepted, they would owe him obedience. He would rewrite history and turn himself into the hero while turning her into the obstacle. The truth settled heavily. That night, Adanna made a decision. They would stop waiting. If Emeka wanted to expose himself, she would allow it. It would be written in confrontation. And Emeka had no idea how ready they were. Emeka changed tactics after the letter. He stopped appearing openly. No car by the gate. No standing in the street. No dramatic entrances. The silence was intentional, and Adanna recognized it immediately. Silence was never peace. Silence was preparation. Life continued on the surface. The children went to school. Adanna went to the market. Meals were cooked. Homework was done. But beneath everything was tension that refused to loosen its grip. Chibuzo noticed it first. Men who pretended to browse near the school gate. A stranger who asked too many questions at the roadside kiosk. A woman at the market who spoke Emeka's name casually, as if it were harmless gossip. Adiz noticed something else. Their neighbors had begun acting differently. Some were suddenly friendly. Others distant. A few looked at Adanna with judgment rather than sympathy. Someone was speaking. One evening, as rain tapped lightly against the zinc roof, a knock came at the gate. Not loud. Not aggressive. Polite. Adanna froze. She did not move immediately. She signaled the children into their positions. Chibuzo near the window. Adiz behind the door. Chika observing quietly. Ifani ready to alert. Neka holding her breath. When Adanna finally stepped outside, she saw an elderly woman standing calmly at the gate. Her wrapper was neatly tied. Her face gentle. Her posture respectful. The woman greeted Adanna warmly and introduced herself as a family elder from Emeka's village. Adanna's stomach tightened. The woman spoke slowly and carefully. She said Emeka had confessed his regrets. She said tradition encouraged reconciliation. She said children deserved both parents. She said holding on to anger could destroy the future. Adanna listened without interruption. The woman then added something that made the air feel heavier. She said Emeka was ready to take responsibility now. He had money, influence, connections. She said refusing him might hurt the children in the long run. Adanna responded calmly. She said the children were not for negotiation. She said abandonment had consequences. She said responsibility delayed was responsibility denied. The woman sighed and shook her head sadly. She warned that stubbornness could attract enemies. Adanna thanked her politely and closed the gate. Inside the house, the children waited silently. Adanna told them everything. Chika immediately understood. Emeka was changing the story, turning abandonment into misunderstanding, turning fear into concern, turning Adanna into the problem. Adiz clenched her fists. She said he was poisoning people. Within days, rumors spread quietly. That Adanna was proud. That she kept children away from their father. That she wanted control. That she was bitter. Offers followed. A school official suggested a sponsor connected to Emeka. A church elder hinted at reconciliation. A neighbor advised Adanna to be careful before she lost support. This was the trap. Emeka was no longer attacking from outside. He was creeping inside the community. Adanna gathered the children again. She explained the strategy clearly. When a man cannot break you directly, he recruits voices. When he cannot control your home, he poisons your environment. Chibuzo asked if they were in danger. Adanna answered truthfully. Yes. That night, something happened that changed everything. Ifani did not come home on time. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Adanna felt panic claw at her chest, but forced herself to stay calm. Chibuzo and Adiz searched nearby streets. Chika stayed home to monitor. Neka cried quietly. Then a message came. A phone number unknown. It said only this. He is safe. Talk to me. Adanna's hands trembled. This was no longer manipulation. This was a move. She called the number. Emeka answered. He spoke calmly. Too calmly. He said Afani was with him. He said the boy had come willingly. He said he only wanted a conversation. Adanna told him to bring her son home immediately. He laughed softly. He said fear was unnecessary. He said this was what reconciliation looked like. Adanna ended the call. She did not cry. She did not panic. She acted. She contacted people she had trusted quietly for years. A teacher, a community leader who owed her a favor, a woman from the market who had seen too much injustice. Within an hour, Emeka's location was known. Ifani was found at a restaurant across town, sitting quietly, confused, unharmed. Adanna did not shout. She did not slap him. She spoke clearly. She told him he had crossed from manipulation into threat. She told him this would be the last warning. She told him the children were not bargaining tools. People were watching now. Emeka realized it too late. He released Ifani. That night, the children did not sleep. They understood now. This was war without weapons. And Emeka had just revealed his hand. Adanna knew the next move would be bigger. So would hers. Something shifted in the air after what happened with Ifani. It was like a veil had been lifted, and suddenly, everything felt different. The house still stood tall, the neighborhood buzzed with life, and the city carried on with its usual rhythm. But deep down, everyone in that compound sensed it. A line had been crossed, and it changed everything. Adanna wasn't about to let fear take the reins. Fear was a luxury she just couldn't afford, especially not now. Instead, she took that fear and transformed it into something solid, something she could stand on. You know how sometimes you just have to turn the tables and take control? That's exactly what she did. The kids picked up on the change right away. It was like a light had flicked on. Routines tightened up, movements became more intentional, and conversations were filled with purpose. Even the silence around them felt heavy with meaning, like every unspoken word carried weight. One early morning, just before school, Adanna gathered the kids. You could feel the tension in the air, but also a sense of determination. She explained that Emeka had shown his true colors. No regrets, no seeking redemption, just a sense of entitlement that made her blood boil. She told them that people like Emeka hated being exposed more than they hated being rejected. And trust me, exposure was coming, and it was going to hit hard. Chibuzo, who had grown taller and stronger, listened intently. You could see the confidence in his eyes. He was ready to step up. He asked what his role would be, and Adanna smiled, knowing he was ready for this. She told him he would be their shield, not with fists, but with his presence. He'd be the one watching, standing guard, keeping an eye on those who watched them. Adiz was in charge of strategy. She had a knack for picking up on gossip, and that was going to be invaluable. She would track the stories, pinpoint who was spreading what, and keep them all in the loop. Chika, ever the meticulous one, would document everything: dates, names, locations, patterns. She understood that truth thrives best when it's written down, and she was ready to be their historian. Ifani, who had been bold to a fault, would learn to hold back. His courage had made him a target, and now it was time for him to learn patience. Neko would stay close, her sharp instincts always on alert, noticing shifts that others overlooked. They weren't just kids trying to survive anymore. They were taking charge of their own safety, and it felt empowering. Emeka, of course, sensed the change, even if he couldn't see it clearly. His attempts to control the narrative ramped up. He started talking louder in public, spinning tales of regret, fear, and pressure. He painted himself as a man who had once run away but had come back wiser. But forced stories crack under pressure, right? Adiz was the first to spot contradictions. She caught dates that didn't line up, claims that clashed with what everyone knew. People he claimed supported him couldn't even look him in the eye. Chica was on it, documenting everything, piecing together the puzzle. One afternoon, a woman from the market pulled Adanna aside, her voice low and conspiratorial. She whispered that Emeka had been asking about land ownership, property, and future inheritance. That was the missing piece of the puzzle. He wasn't here for forgiveness. He was here for access. And that realization hit Adanna like a ton of bricks. Thanking the woman, Adanna walked away, but inside, her resolve strengthened. She had already protected her kids from hunger, sickness, and shame. Now, she would protect them from exploitation too. It was like a fire igniting within her, pushing her to stand tall and firm. As the community began to shift in subtle ways, people noticed that Adanna never spoke badly about Emeka in public. She didn't argue, didn't plead. She just stood her ground. That calmness unsettled him, and so he pushed harder. A community meeting was called under the guise of peace and reconciliation. Elders gathered, neighbors showed up, and curiosity buzzed in the air. Emeka spoke first, his voice smooth as silk. He talked about tradition, family unity, forgiveness, and responsibilities that were delayed but not denied. It was all a show, but people were listening. Then it was Adanna's turn to speak. She stood up slowly, her heart pounding but her mind clear. She didn't raise her voice, didn't insult him. She laid out the facts. She talked about timelines, shared the hardships she endured alone, medical visits without support, childbirth without a husband present, and the 5 newborns abandoned without warning. She spoke about years, not days or weeks. Years. Silence hung in the air like a thick fog. People shifted in their seats, some exchanging glances, while Emeka tried to interrupt. An elder raised a hand, and for the first time, the room turned against him, not with shouts or anger, but with quiet rejection. That was worse. After that meeting, things changed. Emeka's allies began to pull away, whispers turned cautious, and doors closed politely. The kids felt it too. Chibuzo noticed fewer eyes on them. Adiz heard gossip slow down, and Chika wrote less because there was less to document. It was like a weight had been lifted, and they could finally breathe. But Emeka wasn't done yet. Men like him never are. One evening, Adanna received another message. This one was shorter, colder. If I can't be part of their lives, no one will respect you. Adanna deleted it without a second thought. She had seen this coming, and the threat wasn't physical. It was about reputation, economics, and social standing. But Adanna was already ahead of the game. She started formalizing everything: school records, medical histories, legal documents, witness statements. Years of evidence quietly lined up, ready to be unleashed if needed. Emeka had underestimated her, mistaking her silence for weakness. The kids felt a shift in power. They moved with more confidence now, not arrogance, just a quiet assurance that they were in control of their lives. Ifani even apologized to his mom one night, admitting he had been tempted by the idea of taking the easy way out. Adanna held him close, reassuring him that temptation didn't make him weak. Acting without wisdom did. Neka, always the curious one, asked if their father was evil. Adanna answered carefully, choosing her words with love. Some people aren't evil, sweetheart. They're just empty. And empty people consume. It was a heavy truth, but one they needed to understand. As the weeks rolled on, Emeka became erratic. His appearances were unpredictable, and his messages were all over the place. His calm facade started to crack, revealing the desperation beneath. That's when Chika stumbled upon something unexpected: an old document, a record from years back, a financial agreement tied to Emeka's disappearance. He hadn't just run from responsibility, he had run from debt. The truth was heavier than they ever imagined. Adanna stared at the papers in silence, feeling a mix of anger and relief. Everything was starting to come together: the abandonment, the timing, the sudden return, the urgency. He wasn't looking for family. He was looking for shelter, and the storm was about to hit its peak. And Emeka was standing right under it. And the truth changed everything. Once Adanna understood why Emeka had truly returned, the fear she once felt toward him disappeared completely. What replaced it was something colder: precision, clarity, control. A man running from debt was not seeking family. He was seeking cover. Emeka's behavior shifted almost immediately. His movements became rushed. His calm vanished. His messages turned erratic. He stopped pretending to be patient. Chibuzo noticed it first. Emeka no longer watched from a distance. He hovered. He lingered. He appeared suddenly and left abruptly. Adiz noticed his tone change when he spoke to others. Less charm, more frustration. He was losing ground. Chika continued documenting quietly. Names, dates, statements. He noticed something important. Emeka was trying to rush reconciliation. Men with time do not rush. Men being chased do. Adanna began making moves of her own. She visited places she had avoided for years. Offices, records, institutions. She spoke calmly, presented facts, asked questions. Each answer confirmed what she already suspected. Emeka had accumulated obligations long before he disappeared. Loans, promises, guarantees. He had vanished at the moment accountability arrived. The birth of the children had not scared him. Exposure had. Now exposure was catching up again. And this time he had nowhere to hide. The pressure made him reckless. One evening he appeared at the gate unannounced. No elders, no messengers, no gifts, only anger. He accused Adanna of poisoning the children against him. He accused her of humiliation. He accused her of stealing his future. Adanna listened silently. When he finished, she spoke calmly and told him the children were not weapons and she was not his shield. She told him to leave. He stepped closer. For the first time, the children saw rage clearly in him. Chibuzo stepped forward instinctively. Adanna raised a hand. She told Emeka to look around. Neighbors were watching. Phones were out. His mask was gone. That was when he said something that confirmed everything. He said if she did not cooperate, she would regret it. Not them. Her. That threat sealed his fate. From that day forward, Adanna stopped reacting. She documented everything. She stopped speaking to him entirely. And she let the system do what it does best when given truth. The children noticed how quiet their mother became. Not weak quiet. Focused quiet. One morning, officials came to the neighborhood asking questions. Calm questions. Professional questions. Emeka noticed. Panic crept into his eyes. He tried one last move. He approached Adiz alone near the market. He spoke quickly, offered money, promised freedom, promised opportunity. Adiz listened. Then she walked away. That rejection broke something in him. Within days, his name began circulating in ways he could not control. Debts resurfaced. Old partners reappeared. Demands followed. He came to the house again late one night. This time he begged. Adanna did not open the gate. She spoke through it. She told him the same thing she told him years ago when he left. Actions have consequences. She told him she would not save him from the life he chose. He left quietly. The next morning, news spread fast. Emeka had been detained. Not for abandonment. Not for manipulation. For the very past he ran from. The children processed it slowly. Ifani felt relief mixed with confusion. Neka asked if this meant he would disappear again. Adanna said some people disappear not because others push them away, but because truth pulls them under. The storm had broken. But the story was not finished. Because release does not always mean reform. And Emeka was not done yet. Emeka's detention did not bring peace the way Adanna thought it would. It brought quiet, yes, but it also brought waiting. The kind of waiting that stretches nerves thin and forces memories to resurface. The house felt different. Lighter, yet tense. As if everyone was holding their breath. The children asked fewer questions. They moved carefully around their mother, sensing that something final was approaching. Adanna stayed composed. But inside her, years of buried pain were stirring. Detention was not closure. It was a pause. 2 weeks later, the message came. Emeka wanted to see her. Not through elders. Not through threats. Through official channels. Adanna read the notice slowly. She did not feel fear. She felt certainty. She gathered the children that evening. She told them she would go. Chibuzo immediately protested. Adiz stiffened. Ifani looked panicked. Neka clung to her waist. Adanna explained that some doors must be closed face to face. She said this meeting was not for him. It was for her. She promised them she would return. The day of the visit was hot and heavy. The kind of heat that pressed against the skin and made breathing slow. When Adanna entered the room, Emeka was already seated. He looked smaller, not physically, but internally. Stripped of performance. Stripped of audience. Stripped of power. He tried to smile. It did not land. He spoke first. He said he never planned for things to go this way. He said pressure ruined him. He said fear controlled his decisions. He said regret haunted him. Adanna listened. She noticed how his words centered himself. His fear. His loss. His pain. She waited until he finished. Then she spoke. She said fear did not excuse cruelty. She said pressure did not justify abandonment. She said regret without responsibility was manipulation wearing softer clothes. She told him she buried miscarriages alone while he laughed. She told him she carried 5 children and a body doctors had declared useless. She told him she survived nights of hunger and days of humiliation without him. She told him he did not get to rewrite that story. Emeka's eyes filled. He asked if she hated him. Adanna answered honestly. She said hate requires energy she no longer had. She said indifference was not punishment. It was freedom. He asked about the children. Adanna told him they were thriving, strong, united, aware. She told him they no longer needed explanations. She told him that if he truly cared about them, he would stop trying to insert himself into their lives as a reward. He broke then. Not dramatically. Quietly. He asked for forgiveness. Adanna stood. She said forgiveness was not access. She said she forgave him years ago so she could survive. But reconciliation required trust, and trust had expired. She walked out. The meeting ended without shouting, without tears, without promises. That was the final confrontation. When Adanna returned home, the children were waiting. She did not give details. She only told them it was finished. That night, they slept deeply for the first time in years. But endings are rarely clean. Weeks later, Emeka was released under conditions. He did not return to the neighborhood. He did not call. He did not write. The children grew. Exams were passed. Opportunities opened. Talents bloomed. Adanna watched them with quiet pride. One evening, Ifani asked a question that lingered. He asked if people could change. Adanna answered carefully. She said change was possible, but not guaranteed. And no one should pause their life waiting to see if someone else would evolve. The past had faced the present. Time did what struggle could not. It softened the sharpest memories and strengthened what truly mattered. The house no longer felt like a fortress. It felt like a home. Morning routines became lighter. Laughter returned without hesitation. The children moved with confidence, shaped by survival, not fear. Chibuzo became a man before Adanna fully noticed it happening. His voice deepened. His posture carried responsibility. He protected without being asked and observed without being obvious. People respected him naturally. Adiz thrived in ways that surprised even her. Her intelligence turned into leadership. She spoke with clarity. She challenged authority respectfully. Teachers noticed. Opportunities followed. Chika found his strength in precision. His ability to notice details became purpose. He learned that truth had power when recorded properly. He dreamed of justice, not revenge. Ifani matured quietly. The boy who once craved ease learned discipline. He trained his body and mind. He learned patience. He learned that shortcuts often lead back to pain. Neka grew into awareness beyond her years. She noticed moods. She understood silence. She carried empathy without weakness. Adanna watched them from a distance sometimes, not because she was disconnected, but because she had finally learned how to breathe. The years of struggle had carved something permanent into her. Strength without bitterness. Vigilance without paranoia. Love without fear. News of Emeka reached them occasionally. Always indirectly. Always incomplete. He moved between towns. He struggled to rebuild. He stayed away. He never came back to the house. Adanna did not celebrate that. She accepted it. One afternoon years later, Adanna sat alone in the compound as sunlight filtered through the trees. She thought about the woman she once was. The woman who cried silently at night. The woman who questioned her worth. The woman who survived mockery, abandonment, and fear. That woman no longer existed. What remained was someone forged. The children returned home that evening laughing loudly. Their voices filled the compound. Their presence filled her heart. Adanna realized then that the greatest revenge was not success. It was peace. Emeka had wanted legacy without labor, control without commitment, reward without sacrifice. What he left behind became his lesson. What Adanna built became her legacy. 5 lives raised without resentment. 5 souls shaped by truth. 1 woman who refused to break. The storm had passed, and what remained was unshakable. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, like, comment, and share.